Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University, and I am the Director of the Lorraine W. Frank Office of National Scholarships Advisement. And I am the campus representative as well in that role for the Killam Fellowships, which is a program of Fulbright Canada. So the Fulbright program is a Department of State program, but we operate it, in cooperation with countries all around the world. So it's a program of Fulbright Canada, and it exists to promote exchange between U.S. institutions and Canadian institutions. So give you a sense of what we'll be talking about today. We'll, of course, cover the brass tacks sort of stuff, the mission of the program, uh, eligibility, so not editability or whatever that word is, and general criteria for selection. We'll talk about the timeline, which is important, of course, as you're planning your semester, and then I'll introduce you to some strategies for how do we even choose a Canadian university and just general application strategy in general. Once we get to a certain point, your questions will become unique to you, and that's where advising comes in, right? And we'll also talk about how you can schedule an advising appointment. So if you're not familiar with ONSA, the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, you might not be familiar with this concept of national scholarships. We differentiate between this category of awards that I'm talking about, national scholarships, and general financial aid, right? And so we don't have anything to do with your general financial aid, anything ASU merit or need-based or anything like that. We don't handle that, thank goodness. What we work with are awards like Killam, which come from outside of ASU. And these are all merit-based awards that have their own very specific selection criteria. They differ greatly. There are very few things that unite them in terms of purpose, except they are looking to identify students in some way to provide them some sort of benefit, right? That's about it. Deadlines, process, all of these things are all over the place, and therefore that's why I have a job. But what they do have in common is, again, they all have their own criteria, so they are merit-based. Some of them are looking for students with financial need, but Killam is not one of those. They all come from outside of ASU, so that means you're dealing with a very large applicant pool. So you're competing against students from all these other schools who are also applying for this award. Because of their large applicant pool, they're also very competitive, and because they're very competitive, they're very valuable in terms of prestige. If you win a Killam, you can say, yeah, I was one of 16 students selected in this year, which is pretty amazing, right, at the national level. We help our students apply for these awards by doing what we're doing right now. A lot of webinars and virtual information sessions. We do in-person writing groups. We do other kinds of workshops. We got a great workshop coming up this Friday about how to network at the university. A lot of one-on-one advising, right? We work with students through individual appointments, both in person and virtually. A lot of that time is spent on writing instruction. So we will help you write better application essays. And the good news is, the more often you do this, the more awards you apply for, the better you get at doing this, right? We also coordinate the campus committees. Many awards, like the Killam, requires that you be nominated in order to apply. So I chair those committees. I identify faculty members, I train them, get them on board to help identify our best candidates. And I'll also work with your faculty members to help be great mentors and write better letters of recommendation for you as well. So the topic at hand, of course, is Killam. It is a program of Fulbright Canada, which exists to promote exchange between the U.S. and Canada. It is open to full-time students, and what it does is it basically provides full-time enrollment for 1 or 2 semesters at a Canadian institution. Generally speaking, 90% of the time, the award goes to somebody who proposes a single semester exchange, so whether fall or spring semester. There are other opportunities within the program. There's some leadership development, opportunities for additional travel, even opportunities for internships after the program. You will get a $6,000 cash award to be used by you as you see fit. You would actually pay, we'll talk about this a bit more, you'll actually pay your ASU tuition, so it's capped there. So that award is in addition to whatever other funds you receive. They will provide the necessary support for you to get health benefits in Canada. And at the beginning and end of the year, you'll start the year with a 3-day orientation in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, in case you didn't know. I actually just saw on LinkedIn, they just had their orientation. It was hilarious. They always get together for a hockey game. So they drag a bunch of Americans who know very little about skating out and throw some Fulbright Canada sweaters on them and take pictures. And then at the end of the cycle, all the Killam Fellows will meet in Washington, D.C. for another summit, so to speak. So these are, leadership development, professional development opportunities. Get to meet a lot of other really great future leaders, and not just the people that are participating in Killam, but you'll get to meet some of the people participating in the Fulbright program and Fulbright Scholar programs and things like that. The other thing to keep in mind is that you won't just be there with Americans. The Killam program is bilateral, and so there are an equal number of Canadian college students who are receiving fellowships to come study in the US. ASU is a partner program for the Killam, which means every year we host at least one, usually two or three Canadian undergraduates who come study at ASU. And it's not uncommon that they decide to stay after coming from Alberta and seeing a palm tree, right? As I mentioned, there is opportunity for what they call a mobility grant. So you can apply for an additional $800 to basically take a trip in Canada. You want to see more of Canada, you want to engage with the culture a bit more, they'll help support that trip. There is an internship program available for internships in Ottawa. So generally government-related internships if you'd like to participate in that. If you have an idea for a social impact project, you can apply for a $5,000 grant. And then they'll match you up with an alumni mentor as well. And so get a lot of professional mentoring through the program as well. So not just the cash award, not just the credits you'll earn, but the experience of spending a term in a foreign country, getting to meet all these other great future leaders, and then all this opportunity for these other benefits as well. So again, because it's exchange between the US and Canada, they are offering this only to US citizens. You need to be a full-time student at the time of application, and you need to have some study remaining after your Killam experience. So you couldn't do this for your final year. So generally speaking, current first year, second year, and third year students would be ideal candidates. Obviously, you need to speak English, but French is also the national language of Canada. There are a couple of universities where French language proficiency would be required. So that's something to pay attention to, depending on what programs you want to go into. Superior and competitive academic record, they don't really specify, but historically, our successful candidates have been above a 3.7. The application is pretty straightforward. There's an online application that you will submit that will then come to us for review. And that includes a form where you list the courses that you would like to take at each of the universities that you've selected. So that does require a little bit of legwork on your part. You'll work with your academic advisor to make sure that those courses would transfer. And we'll talk a bit more about the strategies for that in a moment. There is a one-page personal statement. You'll include a resume. You'll need to get 2 references, transcripts, and of course, proof of citizenship, which usually takes the form of a passport. If you don't have a passport, now's a good time to start because processing times do take a bit. You're going to need one if you win anyway. So as I mentioned at the outset, we are a partner program with Killam, which means that we are one of the handful of schools in the US where we host students from Canada, which means that they almost certainly will select one of our students. So I cannot promise you or guarantee you that every year an ASU student will win, at least one ASU student will win a Killam fellowship. But generally speaking, the only time we haven't had someone selected for a Killam fellowship is in a year where nobody applied, right? So interpret what I'm telling you, that our students get very strong preference for this. So we can nominate up to 6 semesters worth of students per year. So assuming that everyone is applying for a single semester program, that would mean 6 students. We rarely exceed that cap. We have in the past, but rarely do we get more than 6 students applying. So I hope what you're hearing me is like, this is an excellent opportunity if you're looking to get after a national scholarship or add a major fellowship to your CV. This would be a really wonderful place to start. Between 15 and 20 fellows are selected per year. And really what they're looking at is your proposed program of study, reading your personal statement, looking at your academic record, and then evaluating your letters of reference. And that's the basic criteria they're using to identify Killam Fellows. In terms of timeline, you need to complete an intake meeting with me by December 6th. Obviously, we'll talk more about an ideal timeline, but that's the latest date by which you can start an application. We have a nomination deadline of January 15th, so you will need to have a complete application submitted by that point. We will then identify the nominees, have a little bit of time to make final revisions, and then submit by January 31. And then by mid-March, you'll find out if you're going to Canada next year. Ideally, you would be doing your intake meeting soon. So end of this month into the start of November, which would give you ample time to start working on drafts for this. Give you time as well to think about whom you're going to approach for your letters of recommendation. You'll also need to meet with our regional specialist in GEO, the study abroad office. You'll also need to identify your course selections and meet with your academic advisor. So there's a lot of little tasks to do. And I think you really don't want to have to rush that stuff. And so through late November and into December, you can continue revising and editing. We work over the break. Great. So where can you go? These are all the participating universities in Killam, and I've actually arranged them geographically from east to west. And let's see who's got a great grip on Canadian geography. As you can see, the majority of the participating universities are in Ontario, which is the most populous province of Canada. The Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick are tiny little provinces in comparison. There aren't any, oddly enough, in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, which are the Great Plains of Canada. But you have Alberta and Calgary in Alberta, which is cool. University of Victoria in British Columbia, it's right there by Seattle. So a lot of great choices. Fun fact, 1 in 5 Canadians lives in Toronto. So it gives you some idea of population distribution. So to help you a little bit, to give some sense of Canadian geography. So Newfoundland and Labrador are our northeastern province. So we've got a couple of options there, PEI and New Brunswick, little maritime provinces. And so collectively, those are referred to as the maritime provinces. Quebec has 2 options, and that is where you're most likely to encounter your French-speaking options. And so that would be Montreal University and McGill University. McGill and the University of Toronto are probably the most prominent universities in terms of global rankings, the most research expenditures, probably the greatest breadth and depth of programs. But Canadian educational system's a little bit different than the US, where they don't have sort of tiers in much the same way that we do. Generally speaking, it's kind of like the entire country's ASU. Anyone who has an adequate academic record can probably go to whatever university they want to go to, right? It gets a little dicey with Toronto and McGill, but other than that, as I mentioned, we go all the way to the west, and you see Victoria is right there on Victoria Island, and so completely different climate than what we might see in Ontario, Quebec. Completely opposite climate of what we might encounter here in Arizona. Nothing in Nunavut yet with the newest province, but maybe someday. So program selection. This matters quite a bit. It's actually at the top of their list because they're trying to ensure that they get a good distribution of Killam Fellows throughout the country. So undersubscribed options generally gain preference. Meaning universities that haven't gotten a Killam Fellow recently or don't get a lot of applications. So what I would really suggest you do is, as you're evaluating the different programs, also take a look at the winners from the last couple of years. Their information's on the website. You can see, okay, 6 out of the 6 out of the 60 for the last 3 years have gone to the same university. Maybe I should steer clear of that. So all things being equal, if you don't have any other reason not to, try to stay away from the most popular choices like Toronto and McGill. And then it's kind of a steep hill after that. Ottawa, because it's the capital, there's a couple of great options there. York is a really great option if you want to be in Toronto but don't want to do UT. Like I said, there's a lot of options to choose from. You're going to identify and rank at least 3 programs, and that's what most people do. I think going beyond that's kind of overkill, but you're welcome to rank more than that. But you'll rank 1, 2, 3, your top 3 choices. You have to be cool with each of those, right? We had an applicant not too long ago that was like, definitely want number 1, definitely want number 2. I'm picking number 3 because I have to. They actually got offered number 3 and they said, no, thank you, and declined the award. A little sad, but if that program really didn't fit for them, it didn't fit for them. I think they probably could have made it work, but it's their life. Um, so you need to be cool with going to any one of the three that you're offered, right? Because again, they'll try to meet your preferences, but again, some places are more popular than others. So as you're looking at programs, the things we want to consider the quality of the specific academic programs, not just the general reputation of the university, but if you are interested in political science or economics or chemical engineering or music, right? PEI out in Prince Edward Island. And we had somebody go out there that was really interested in environmental engineering and sustainable food pathways. Great programs for that out there. There's these huge tracts of sustainable farms out there. They had a wonderful experience. We had another student go out to one of the maritime provinces for a music conservatory, right? So you got to do that homework to figure out what university offers programs that match what I'm trying to do. So looking at the faculty, but also thinking about lifestyle. Are there opportunities for me to be involved in research or student groups or extracurricular activities? Is there something relevant to this part, of Canada? So if you were one of our new Oceans Futures majors, like a marine biologist or something like that, I would stay out of Alberta, right? It's landlocked. I would look at Victoria or Newfoundland, right? Victoria. And again, looking at cultural opportunities. So Indigenous studies, First Nation studies is very big at a lot of Canadian universities. So that would change depending on the region. As being at Carleton or Ottawa in the nation's capital, if you're really interested in international affairs, might make a lot of sense. A great place to start is universitystudy.ca. And so that's sort of a general website for people wanting to jump into the Canadian higher education system. And you can take a look at what's available at different universities, what are different universities known for. I have some materials that I received from Killam that have brief snapshots of the participating universities, and we'll package that up in a Dropbox for you as well. So again, in thinking about the course selection, as you're picking courses, say you decided on a university because it's got a really strong economics program, they take an approach that ASU doesn't take, it'll be a huge advantage. As you're selecting courses, lean into or try to include courses that you can't just take at ASU, right? That is especially important as you're to start thinking about maybe Canadian history courses, Canadian literature courses, courses that take a Canada-centric or a comparative approach, right? Because that'll be the essence of your argument that I am going abroad for this semester because I want to gain a different perspective on this topic that I can get back at ASU. If you're going and you're basically just taking the same course that you would take here, it's not going to be a very strong application. Now, some things don't change. Math does not change between here and there. Engineering principles do not change between here and there for the most part. But whatever you take, yeah, you got to be moving forward on your major map. So sometimes it might just be, yeah, I'm going to take differential equations because I need to. Or, but also you got to think, how does my course selection rate to my larger career goals? You also might want to point out, there's notable faculty that, these are particularly rigorous or unusual courses that are really going to help move you towards your larger goals. Recommendations. For many of you, particularly younger students, this might be the first time you've approached somebody for a letter of reference for a major scholarship like this. Generally speaking, you want to approach people that know you well, right? That have had a good opportunity to see you firsthand, that have material to write in this letter, that they can offer specific examples of you exhibiting the behaviors that the fellowship selectors want to see. So in most cases, that would be somebody who's taught you in college courses. Barrett students tend to have a good advantage because most of them take the same instructor for the entire first year in human event. If you've been in a research experience, a research supervisor could be a great reference, but also, professional references could work as well. So if you had something outside of the university, if you had a very active volunteer experience or an internship or something like that, as long as it's somebody of consequence, that letter could work as well. This is more for the younger students. We want to avoid asking high school teachers because, we kind of come out the other side of the hill, so to speak, once we transition from high school to college. If you've maintained a relationship, if, you're still working together on projects or something, sure. But generally speaking, Not that they don't know you well, not that they aren't people of consequence, but their frame of reference is high school students as opposed to a college instructor's frame of reference being college students. So they might not, that letter might not carry as much credence. Never, 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 ever ask one of your peers for a letter of recommendation. It just doesn't work, right? Even if you bluff your way through it, the letter won't be good because they don't know this genre, right? It probably won't be specific and it probably won't have a lot of credibility in terms of comparing you with other students or really getting into the academic topic. Just avoid doing it. Managers from your part-time jobs, many of us work while we're in school. I get it. 15 hours a week is the sweet spot from according to the studies. Um, you spend a lot of time with these people, they know you well, maybe they promoted you, but again, to this audience, the manager at the restaurant where you're a host or hostess isn't going to offer them the kind of observation that the fellowship selectors need, right? In a different context, in a different situation, that might work well, but not for this. And another impulse that we have is, hey, I'm going to ask the judge who lives in my hometown, uh, for a letter. And first of all, as soon as they mention I'm a family friend, like the letter loses all credibility. Um, if it's, say you interned for Ruben Gallego and you saw him exactly once the entire summer, you don't get the letter from Ruben Gallego, get the letter from your direct supervisor, right? So the importance or the prestige of the person writing the letter does not matter as much as the depth of content for that letter from somebody who has a good frame of reference. This isn't the 1800s anymore, where you could get a letter from an important person, and that would fix everything. They want to see content in these. All right, personal statement. This is the three-part prompt for the personal statement. Again, this is one page. And while that might sound like a relief to those of you that don't like writing long papers, there's a lot to do in this one page. And this is actually something of a challenge. So it's a narrative statement. So keep that in mind. We've got to tell a story in a manner of speaking that there has to be a logical narrative connection between everything we do in this essay. Explaining why you want to study in the United States as a Killam Fellow. I copied the Canadian instruction. So flip that in Canada as a Killam Fellow. And again, this is kind of cool because both sides are using the same instructions, right? Seems pretty obvious. You need to explain why you want to go to Canada. And oddly enough, a lot of applicants struggle with that. Discuss what you hope to accomplish during your exchange in Canada and how the experience fits your current interests and future goals. So what are your objectives there? What do you imagine will happen while you're in Canada? Be specific. Are there groups, organizations, research opportunities, extracurricular interests, and connect those to what you want to do in the future. And you got to be able to articulate what you want to do in the future, right? That's the hard part. Highlight any experiences demonstrating your ability to adapt to other cultural settings, a willingness to share or learn from others of different national identities, and your ability to serve as an ambassador for the United States. So this is sort of the soft skills part of it, where as you're explaining your background and what you've done, you'll want to emphasize any experiences that illustrate your ability to be a good ambassador, cultural ambassador. So again, that's actually a lot to do, right? We got to tell your life story, talk about what you want to be when you grow up, talk about what you want to do in the future in Canada, and also make sure they understand that you're a great ambassador. So good news is I'm here to help with that. And so as you begin the drafting process, you can be sharing drafts of that with me for feedback and review. So for detailed application instructions, the actual step-by-step, you can actually download that from our website under the Apply tab. You won't see that bright red arrow. That was there for emphasis. And when you're ready to schedule an intake meeting, you can do that through our website as well. There's a button that says make an appointment. And again, there's no giant blue arrow there, but it's pretty easy to find. And if you aren't subscribed to our weekly bulletin, I really suggest you do that. It's a great way to stay abreast of what's happening and what events are coming down the pike. So, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Speaking Canadian there. For your time and attention, I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have at this point. So you're welcome to unmute yourself, raise a hand, pop it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable doing.
This is kind of a specific question, but hypothetically, like if you have family in Canada, would you be able to, if you did get picked and like chose a place to study that was near them, would you be able to like live with them or how would that work?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. This is one of the programs where once an applicant gets a yes, I don't know much about what happens, which is a good thing, right? Because that means there's very few problems. I would imagine, generally speaking, study abroad programs love homestays. It's the best way to get to know, participate in cultural exchange. I don't know if they'd permit that with a family member. I don't see why they wouldn't, but that's something we can find out from them pretty easily.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mhm. Emily?
Yeah, I had kind of a specific question about Carleton. Is that like a popular university high on my list, or should I start to research? I've toured all the colleges that I'm interested in personally
Oh, cool.
because I love Canada. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
um, this
Wow.
is more of a long-term goal.
Yeah, that's great. I would put Carleton in, maybe the second tier. The top tier is really Toronto and McGill. Those
Hmm.
are the ones that have the global rankings because they are the sort of key research universities. And so beyond that, there isn't as much demand for Carleton or York or Western or any of those. So I think you should be
Okay,
fine.
perfect.
Mhm. Absolutely. In case you couldn't tell, I'm from that part of the world as well. I grew up in Michigan, and so when I start talking about Canada, my accent starts to revert a little bit.
That's
So
crazy. I just drove through Michigan again when I went
yeah,
out there.
yeah, nice. Yeah, that was like our NHS junior year trip was to go to Toronto for the weekend. So Arvid asked a great question. I was worried about filling out my medical school prereqs and how they would show up in my transcript. Showed a medical schools. Yeah. So knowing what you need to complete for medical school prereqs, you could just be sure, that you getting one of those courses in. So that's what I was saying is like, generally speaking, we want to try to take courses you couldn't take at ASU, but then from practical reasons, like maybe you need to take, part one or part two of calculus, or you need to take one of your, lab sciences or, physics or whatever else you need to take. Um, that shouldn't be a problem, and eventually it'll appear on your transcripts as transfer credit. We'll work with Geo. You'll get a placeholder credit, then that credit gets applied, and then you can also get the transcript from the university. So it should not, have any issues as far as prereqs goes. Yeah, assuming you know what you need to take. Any other questions?
Hold on, I have a question real fast. Um, so I'm an engineering student. Is
Mhm.
this like a normal thing for engineering students? I know like I'm gonna go into my junior year, so I don't know how hard that would be with my major map just because they're so specific with my class
Mhm.
load.
Yeah, we have had plenty of engineers go. Like if Michael Kim you saw earlier was I believe, a chemical engineer in 2014. One of our selectees this year was astrophysics, which isn't as rigid, but still there's a sequence to the courses. We could go back through. There's a few engineers that have gone, and some have gone specifically because they wanted to get involved in research. You just need to make sure you spend the time with your academic advisor to ensure that the courses would transfer over. The way that this works is we've got this huge database of transfer courses, and if it's ever transferred in before, it's in that database. And then if it's not in that database, then they just have to do a little research to see, if it's equivalent to whatever course here. So just take a little more time talking to your academic advisor, but we've definitely had engineers do this before.
Great, thank you so much.
Mhm. Yeah, Emily asked a good question. Will reference wanting to immigrate there be a strong reason, or that should that be omitted? That's a good question, and kind of where I thought the first question was going as well, which is, should I mention that I've got family in Canada or I've got, family ties or historical connection? It only matters as much as what you do with it, right? A lot of times, then this is a kind of an American thing because all Americans, 95% of us, originate from outside the current United States. It only matters what you do with it. I don't know that they would find it super impressive, because it's an exchange program. They might like it more that you want to return to the US and share what you've learned about Canada. But at the same time, they very much want to hear about how you plan to continue to be a good ambassador for Canada in the long term. So really, we'll just have to prototype it and see how it works out. But in and of itself, it only matters what as much as you make it matter, right? Good questions. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Wonderful. So if you do have some questions that you're percolating and aren't ready to ask, feel free to just shoot me an email. And I'm pretty easy to find. You probably should have gotten an email from me if you're here. And again, we will follow up with a link to the recording for this, as well as additional information, and hopefully get you ready to get started. Once you get in process, we also have a Canvas module for this that I've been kind of buffing out. It's been pretty bare bones. We have some example essays as well that you can refer to, which really helps you understanding how to get all this done in one page. Got another question in the chat. Armin asks, I hear med schools do not like out-of-the-country credit for important prereqs like the science courses. Would my transcript show the equivalent course as it was taken from ASU? Yeah, I don't know 100% on that. I'm trying to remember what that looks like on a transcript. If typically, yeah, I mean, typically what happens, and it takes a little bit of time. I'm thinking back to some students I've worked with recently. It takes a little bit of time, but it does appear on your ASU transcripts, right? It's marked as taken as study abroad. Or taken as direct exchange, right? Because the different types of study abroads at ASU include faculty-led, external, and direct exchange. And so you're actually would be working through our study abroad office to participate in this direct exchange. And then once that transcript comes into play, it'll update your transcripts and it'll show course titles and credits. I think Canada is probably fine. They're not gonna sweat too much that you took physics in Canada or things like that. But definitely talk to your pre-med advisor, right? And get a better sense of that. Great. Last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time and attention. I do appreciate this. I really like this program. I like all the programs I work with, obviously, but I do really like the Killam program. They're wonderful people to work with. Everyone that's gone has had a wonderful experience. And it's also a great way to get into competitive fellowships. So many of our Killam fellows go on to apply for many other things, including Fulbright, obviously. I think we've got at least 2 Killam fellows in the current applicant cohort for Fulbright every year. Somebody wants to get back in line because they were so changed by this experience. They want to keep participating in this kind of cultural exchange. So hopefully this is something that's going to work out for you. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope we'll talk soon. Thank you all very much.